kind of harken back to Hollywood, right? Where's the talent? Who's the talent that is going to be on stage? Like, to your point, Danny, it wasn't like, who's the amazing person? It's like this kind of thing. And so for a long time, I've had conversations with folks because I led talent management research, and it was like, is management the right term? Is talent the right term? The whole thing was just a mess. And so I think now, though, with our particular focus, the current zeitgeist around humanization and empathy and really understanding, I think it's come back around into being a pretty big topic.
Yeah. Well, it was definitely kind of a little bit news to me, and very interesting. Then also to echo what you said, Danny, I went into this saying, sort of financial, this company plays in the sort of financial space, unlike some of our other interviews with, for example, medical device companies, where there seems a very clear alignment to doing good and having purpose. I wondered how this was going to go, and I was just so pleasantly surprised with how rigorous S&P are being about sort of getting after this topic, right? And they were signatories, interestingly, to the Business Roundtable statement, and she talks very eloquently about how they took that as a launching point to have a deep conversation across the organization. And they're already in their sixth iteration, People First 6.0, of changing practices, including actually doing away with evaluations during the pandemic, like just not having a competitive evaluation process, which I thought was really extraordinary and an example of people taking action around this.
It was not necessarily surprising that they were getting rid of performance reviews, because that's a trend that we've been seeing for years. And she mentioned how that was something that was occurring or was being discussed even before the pandemic. But what I did love was how she talked about just this overall so much more humanistic approach, and how they were thinking through still, yes, we have to make a profit. We still have to be a profitable business to work. But so much of our purpose as an organization is to enable people to fulfill their own purpose and to provide the best for them that we can. Just seemed like this bigger ethos. And I have to say, I almost wanted to kiss her or kiss the screen when she mentioned Milton Friedman. I was like, yes. I felt like she and I wasn't there on the conversation, but I felt like our brains were connected. It was amazing.
I was just going to say, I found it interesting that she actually talked about many of the stakeholders that Stacia brings up in her research. So she talked about government, she talked about social, she talked about environmental. All of those things are playing a role in some of the decisions they're making at S&P, which I found fascinating.
Yeah, I loved it. I think it's a really great conversation in the overall sort of mix of conversations we're having. And what I like about it is just how, they took their cue from that announcement that we were very skeptical about, and they actually went to work. And I love, she talked about the concept of organizational drift. If you don't keep paying attention to this, then you can drift away. And she said, you have to work at this every day, which I thought was great.
I did too. It sounded a little bit like, was it Clint or was it Jeff who said, you can't fake it?
Exactly. That was from J&J.
Yeah, you've got to pay attention to this. It's not something that just happens.
She talked about the importance of experimenting, like trying things very quickly. They use agile in how they evolve their people practices. I thought that was very interesting. And she talked about the importance of experimenting and then the importance of scaling very quickly. So she told a story about in the past, we didn't allow people who weren't human resources professionals to be involved because it was too precious and too important. And she talked about rethinking that and just tapping into the energy around people things that's across the entire organization that helps them scale.
I also thought it interesting that they don't have an L&D function and haven't had one for years, at least in the traditional sense. It's basically pretty decentralized. And so the people in the middle are worried more about culture and about how things are being done rather than the day-to-day execution of course building and things like that.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, they have a chief culture officer.
Yeah.
They have somebody who's head of culture.
Yep.
That was quite interesting. All in all, a really fantastic interview. And not that I had any low expectations around either the company or the person, but it really surprised me on how rigorous they were going after this.
I was kind of thinking the same thing. You and I, Chris, have known Rachel for years, so we know what kind of brain she is. But I was still very pleasantly surprised by the conversation.
Everybody should listen to her talk about the importance of her musical background and how she brings that to work every day. That's really quite a magical piece. It was a lovely, lovely conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it was great. I also love the musical reference.
We're very grateful for the team at NovoEd for their sponsorship of this season. Global enterprises rely on NovoEd's collaborative online learning platform to build high-value capabilities that result in real impact. With NovoEd, you deliver powerful, engaging learning that activates deep skill development and drives measurable business outcomes. NovoEd will host a live webinar later in the season where Danny, Stacia and I will reflect on what we've learned, the implications for you as learning and talent teams, and take your questions and comments live. To reserve your seat, to get your questions in, and find other bonus materials, please register now at www.novoed.com/purpose.